Hi everyone, welcome to our channel Career LinkPod, and we have Madhur Parashar on our podcast today. Madhur is an immigration consultant working in this industry for a very long time. Let's hear from him. Hi Madhur.
Hello, hi Aayushi. Thank you for having me here.
Hi, Madhu.
Uh,
Hello, Subin.
so Madhur, for someone meeting you for the first time, how would you describe your background and the work you do as an immigration consultant in Canada?
Sure. My background is actually in IT. I used to be, still very much am a software and technology guy. I'm an engineer by education. I started working in IT, and then, interesting enough, just like most immigrants, I was also an international student. Not in Canada, but in US. So in 2008, I came to US to study my MBA, and I did that from University of Rochester in New York. And I worked in IT and finance in New York for a long time in US, and then for almost 13 years actually. And then in 2021, I decided to move to Canada for various reasons, personal, professional, immigration related reasons. And once I moved to Canada, I was flooded with questions from my former colleagues who were very much also interested in moving to Canada. And I started helping them out with some general advice. And at some point, I realized that I love doing this. I want to increase my impact and do this in a proper, licensed professional way. So I went out, I got my immigration diploma and a license, and I started doing this full time. So that has been my journey towards this immigration consulting practice. I also am very much active in my IT background as well. So I run a small IT company, IT consultancy firm. So I have my foot in both pools, which keeps me very busy. In Canada, I help mostly in Canada economic immigration applicants. So express entry, PR, PNPs, and so on. I help a wide variety of potential immigrants find their pathway to permanent residence and temporary residence in Canada.
I would like to say thank you, Madhur, for I know you have been very busy and still you came to our podcast. So thank you so much for that. So what sparked your interest in helping people with immigration?
So my primary interest was because I have been an immigrant all my adult life. Okay, so I have been So I moved to Canada. I moved to US. Sorry, I moved to the US in 2008 as an international student, and ever since then I have been constantly involved in immigration. Basically, my own immigration primarily, but if you know anything about immigration in US, it's a very, very complex and very, very time-consuming and very frustrating process. So I was always constantly involved in immigration, one form or the other. A lot of my time was spent in immigration. So I was already a pseudo expert in US immigration, and my motivation for moving to Canada itself was to simplify my life in terms of immigration, right? So, because immigration, when you're an immigrant, immigration sits in the middle of your life, right? It occupies the most important space. It is on top of your mind. It keeps you up at night. So it has always been part of my identity personally. So when I got a chance to make it part of my identity professionally, I really jumped at the opportunity. And in Canada specifically, the Canadian law allows not just immigration lawyer, but also immigration consultants to provide immigration advice, right? So it was not feasible for me to go back to law school and become an immigration lawyer, but immigration consulting was a pathway through which I could, change my interest into my profession. So that's what drove me towards immigration. And I can really associate with the challenges that immigrants face on a personal level. So for example, I came as an international student. So the whole process of selecting colleges, applying for study permits, going through the whole process, I personally experienced it. finding sponsored jobs, obtaining visa, sponsored work permits, facing the challenges of being rejected because I was an immigrant, and then, trying for permanent residence for several years, not working out. I've been through all of that personally. So I thought that there was this wealth of knowledge and experience inside me, which I wanted to share with other people. So that's what drove me towards immigration.
Yeah.
Static website, I treat it as a news. Every day there are new headlines. Every day you wake up, new policy, new announcement, new changes. So there are so many changes and they're happening so fast. When I was in the US dealing with US immigration system, the challenge was opposite. Like it never changed. Like the industry evolved, new industries started, but the system was still from 35 years ago when we didn't even have broadband, right? So the system never kept up with the industry. In Canada, the problem is opposite. The system moves so fast that if you are not aware of what is going on, you will be left behind and your immigration future will be jeopardized. So that's the reason why it's very important to stay up to date. The second most important reason is because the stakes are so high, right? Getting a work permit refusal could mean that your pathway to PR is gone, right? If you're not getting your work permit approved, you're gone. If you don't apply for PGWP in a timely fashion by maintaining your student status properly, you will not get a PGWP. Then all the 50, 80, 100K that you've spent on your education, it's gone. Right? If you don't apply up with a proper PR complete application, your PR chances are gone. So the stakes are so high. Your career, your personal life, your family's life, your parents' life, everything can just get messed up really badly. So because of that, it's very important. And also, immigration needs a lot of advanced planning. This is not something that you can put together in the last moment. Right. So whatever changes are happening today, they will impact your journey 5 years later, 3 years later, even 10 years later. Right. So that's why it's very important to stay up to date. But I want to add a but. But at the same time, don't overdo it. Okay. There are people who are who are working professionals or students who are supposed to be working and studying, focusing on their career, have become these immigration PhDs, like mini immigration experts. Just you can outsource that to professionals, right? So my advice would be, because not all these changes are not only a lot and happening fast, they're also very complex, right? So when you just superficially read a few headlines, you may be up to date with the changes, but you may not understand the complexities or the nuances of what has changed. So even if you keep up with immigration changes, immigration professionals are better equipped to go and drill down into the details, cite the specific laws, understand the regulations, and apply them. So I think trying to be up to date can also be a dangerous game, because you think you are up to date because you checked some headlines, but actually there is much more inside which you were not aware of. Whereas someone who has not been up to date but says, you know what, I am not up to date, I'm just going to hand this over to my consultant. That's it. That person will have a better outcome than someone who is superficially up to date. So it's important to stay up to date, but don't overdo it. Don't overestimate your own knowledge and your own skill level in immigration. There are lots of things that can go wrong even if you are up to date.
Yeah. Absolutely. I also, when you said about US, the policy and system never change. I remember I have a friend applying for TN visa, and they still don't have IT manager as their TN thing. So you have to apply under system analyst or something. And then from there you have to, So I feel when you said that the thing never changed, and we constantly keep changing policies and everything. So true.
Think about it. US system has a cap on the number of work permits that are issued every year, the H-1B work permits, right?
Yeah.
So the cap was set. The number is 65,000 for regular and 20,000 more if you have a master's degree. So total 85,000, right?
Yeah.
That cap was set more than 25 years ago. I think almost 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there was no Google, Apple, Facebook, Netflix. Those companies did not exist.
Yeah.
The demand that they have generated for IT workers has never been updated in their immigration system. So
Yeah.
that system is still living in the pre-IT era, and our system is changing. So both are at opposite extremes. But I would rather live in a system that changes quickly than a system that never changes.
Thank you for sharing that, Madhur. Over to you, Subin.
Yeah, thank you. Now, moving on to the questions in regards to some of the immigration changes, would you be able to outline some of the significant policy changes which took place, which are different from 2023?
Sure. So, I mean, honestly, this question alone, I can talk about this for 3 hours. Okay. So I'm just going to give, like I said, changes are coming in every day, and there are hundreds of minor changes, but let's talk about some major changes, very top headline level. Okay. The biggest change that we've seen this year has been the change in PGWP eligibility. So back in the day, which is like just a year or two ago, anyone could come to Canada as a student, graduate, get your PGWP, apply for PR. It was a very smooth, straightforward line. Now, to cut back on all that, PGWP eligibility has been changed. So only students who enroll in diploma, or only students who enroll in programs which have a high demand in the industry will be eligible for PGWP, or students who pursue a university level degree at the bachelor, master's, or PhD level. So the government has published a list of courses. Only if you take those courses, they are linked to industry demand, and then you will get PGWP. So that's the biggest change. So no more business diploma, supply chain management, HR generalist courses. Those used to be very high demand. So this impacts students in a very big way, right? There have been changes in LMIA, in the LMIA system. It used to be relatively easy for an employer to get an LMIA, and students used to go on LMIA, get 50 points, get approved. Now the government has severely restricted what kind of employers can file an LMIA, under what circumstances, in which areas. And honestly, most employers now are located in areas where obtaining an LMIA has become extremely challenging. So that's one of the second biggest change. I would say change to the category-based draw has happened in the last 1 year. So in the last 1 year, we know those 5-6 categories: trades, agriculture, healthcare, French, and STEM, transport. Those were introduced, and so the cutoff scores came down for those categories, right? And because of that, the cutoff score for the general category went up so much. So because of that, so many tens of thousands of people are now stuck. So they cannot, they're frozen out of the system. That's been a huge change. Study permit caps have been imposed. So earlier, unlimited number of students could come, and now we have like 400-ish thousand, right? Most recently, student direct stream was ended just a few weeks ago. For the short list of 14 countries, if you met certain criteria, you could get a study permit faster, a little bit easier. But now everyone has to go through the slow process where the study permit rejection rate is higher. So SDS is going to impact students a lot, right? You can't change schools very easily now. You have to apply for a new study permit to change schools. And the biggest and a very big change is coming in January. It was supposed to come by December or November, but it has not. It will most likely come in January, is spousal open work permits. So earlier, any student, any worker could bring their spouse with them to Canada, and they would get an open work permit. But now, for students, only if you're a master's student or very restricted set of students, they will get spousal open permits. And same for workers. Currently, high skill, low skill, both workers, spouses get spousal open work permits. In the future, only spouses of high skill workers in certain tier levels will get a spousal open work. So, and I mean, if I keep going, there will be several dozens of such changes, but I would say these are the biggest changes, in addition to the general change in the mood of the country. People, politicians, the citizens were very much supportive of immigration the past several years. Now the mood has changed. So because of that, the politics has changed and the policies have changed. And that is driving a lot of visa refusals these days. So in general, visa refusals have drastically increased these days, especially in categories like visitor visas and student visas. So I would say those are the biggest changes. Some are policy changes and some are just changes.
Okay. I think you already addressed one of the important questions I had specific to international students. But, and I believe this is the place where experts like you would come in and support these individuals. Apart from that, if you look at any of these policies, as these policies keep on changing, as of today, what would be the major changes in terms of PR for the international students or maybe workers who are already in Canada?
Okay. So in terms of, so there are two very big distinctions there. So first is the workers. Shall we tackle the workers part first? Okay. So if you are a worker in Canada, right, the biggest change that's impacting you is the changes in LMIAs that have been announced currently, right? LMIA used to give you 50 points in the express entry pool, which LMIAs were relatively easier to get earlier. So you could transition to a temporary foreign worker status on a closed work permit. And then you would get an extension of your work permit and you would get 50 points in the express entry pool. All of that has changed or is changing. So we've heard the minister say that 50 points for LMIAs may be taken away. There was a lot of fraud in the system that they're trying to combat by removing the 50 points that you get in the express entry pool. So personally, I don't think that's a good idea. And personally, I don't think it's going to go through. Okay. So there is some speculation. A lot of times government officials, they make some comments and then they really go through with it. So this is one area where I don't think the government will go through, but I may be wrong. So they might reduce the amount of points they give for an LMIA. So remember, in 2015, way back in the day, you used to get 600 points for an LMIA job offer. It wasn't called LMIA, but for a job offer, you would get 600 points. Now you get 50 points, right? They might further reduce it to 20, 25, 30 points. I don't see those point system going. But yes, this will impact temporary foreign workers a lot if that happens. The government has said that low-wage LMIAs will not be approved in areas where the unemployment is greater than 6%, right? Almost all the major cities of Canada have an unemployment rate greater than 6%. So Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, all these places, low-wage LMIAs are going to be very difficult to obtain, except in certain industries. And the low-wage threshold itself has been raised by 20%. Which means an employer must offer almost $35 per hour in most of these jobs in most cities in order to get an LMIA approved. Now, $35 an hour, $70,000 to $75,000 a year is a pretty high salary that most employers in these places cannot afford. Like an employer cannot pay an admin assistant or chef, cook, food service worker, retail store supervisor $75,000, right? So it is going to get very, very difficult to get LMIAs approved for temporary foreign workers. So people whose PGWPs are expiring, want to extend it using an LMIA are going to find it very, very difficult. Even if they get their LMIA approved, if the 50 points are taken away, then they may find it very hard to get a permanent residence, right? So that impacts temporary foreign workers. The LMIA processing times are crazy these days. ESDC says on its website that it approves LMIs in 56 days. That is completely false. Okay, it's taking 9 months for LMIs to get approved these days. And if you file a work permit without an approved LMIA, those work permits are getting refused. So even if your employer agrees to file an LMIA, your work permit might not get approved. If your work permit gets approved, you may not get points for it in the express entry system, right? The wage levels have gone up, so your employer might not agree to sponsor it anymore. So there are so many challenges facing workers. And on top of that, a lot of workers will no longer be able to bring their spouses with them. Like I said, spousal open work permit changes are going to come in January. So Minister Miller has suggested that these spouses of workers in NOC Tier 0 and Tier 1 might be eligible. So retail store supervisors, admin assistants, cooks, chefs, these people's spouses may not get work permits in the future. So it'll get really hard to afford living in cities with just one person's salary. So then these workers might find it difficult to survive here. They might go back. They might come here. So these are all changes that are really, really hitting temporary foreign workers very, very hard. So yeah, that's the part where you were asking me about temporary foreign workers.
Looking at the implications of the guidance, what do you think the international students who are already here or the temporary foreign workers should keep a check-in or maybe try to adapt better in order to be more adjustable to these changing scenarios?
Sure. So for anyone, I would say plan way in advance. Okay. The days of just thinking about just the next step and executing just the next step and thinking that, oh, everything else comes later. We'll see what happens, right? Those days are gone. If you just say, oh, I will apply to some program in Canada and then I will come to Canada and then we'll figure out PR later. It's not going to work anymore. Before coming to Canada as a student, you have to plan which colleges should I apply to, which courses should I apply to, will that program lead to a PGWP or not? If I get a PGWP, will it be a 1 year, 2 year or 3 year PGWP? Based on that, what jobs should I get so that I'm in the in-demand sectors? Based on that, what would be my CRS score like 3 years from now after I graduate, get the work experience? What will be my PR strategy after that? Where should I live, right? All this takes about 5 years. This is a 5-year plan. So you need to know your 5-year plan before coming to Canada. After coming to Canada, I see a lot of students, they just come here for some PG diploma, random program. Then they're like, oh, I don't like this. I jump to the other place. Then I'll go to PEI. Then I'll go to Saskatchewan. And then after all the options are exhausted, then they come to us. And they're like, sir, how can I get a PR? It's too late. It's too late at that point, right? So I would advise that how should students adopt to these changes? Get your planning as much upfront, as much front loaded as possible. Ideally, before even coming here, before even applying to a school. Okay. I hope there are kids out there watching who have not yet applied and they start planning now, right? But even if you've arrived here, it's not too late. You have to plan in advance. Same with workers. Okay. You have to do your due diligence. There's a lot of LMIA fraud, work permit fraud going on. So never pay for an LMIA, never pay for a job offer, verify that the job offer and the employers are genuine. And even if you come here, don't assume that coming here as a worker means, okay, I'm done. Now I'll get PR easily, right? If LMIA points are taken away, will I be able to have enough points for PR, right? If I work in this sector, will my spouse get a work permit? How will we manage the expenses, right? Low wage LMIA work permits will be only valid for 1 year. So will my employer support me in renewing my work permit by filing another LMIA later? If the employer is not going to be interested, then you're coming here just for 1 year. Is it worth it to move to Canada just for 1 year? You'll settle down in 1 month, you will find a place, your kids will start studying, and then after 10 months you have to go, right? So is it worth it? So even working professionals need to identify their full pathway for the next 3 to 5 years. So And then they should have some backup plans and strategies in case something doesn't work out. Then what is my backup? Am I willing to come back to India or Africa or wherever they came from? If they do, will they have like $1 million, like billions of rupees worth of loan on their head? Is it worth it to come back to India with $1 million rupee loan just for the sake of studying or working for 1 year, right? So these are the questions that require a lot of advanced planning, and prospective international students and workers should consider these changes, these implications well in advance. And only if the plan makes sense, then they should come here. And the people who are best positioned to give you this advice on this plan are immigration consultants and immigration lawyers. So consult with them early to have a plan. So that's the most important implication and guidance for temporary foreign workers and students.
All right. I think you already mentioned one of the misconceptions where initially people were thinking, okay, I'll just come here and figure out what I have to do next. But as you might have worked on multiple files of people, what do you think there are some specific misconceptions or misunderstandings an international student or maybe a TFW has while being in this process, which you think, okay, maybe they could have done it prior or maybe a little bit earlier?
So the most important thing for international students now is going to become course selection. Okay. So because now whether you get a PGWP or not will depend on what course you selected. So if you selected a program in business management or supply chain management or HR generalist, those programs are not going to lead to a PGWP. So if today I come across a student who has enrolled in those programs, I would say, stop, think, are you going to get a PGWP or not? Right? So this is something that person could have considered in advance. A lot of people have misunderstood. I come across a lot of people who have misunderstood category-based draws. So, for example, healthcare is a very important category for express entry. So a lot of people think that any job in healthcare will get them category-based selection, right? That is not true. The government publishes a specific list of NCs in healthcare, doctor care. I should be eligible under healthcare. So there are some admin assistants in a hospital. They're like, okay, I got 1 year of admin assistant in hospital. I must be eligible under healthcare. I have to tell them that you're not, because you have to be under specific NOC. So that's a misconception. They think any trades will work. They think any trade will work even if they are unlicensed. So you cannot work as an electrician without a license, as a welder without a license in many provinces. So some people get the experience because they knew somebody in the welding shop. But if it was not licensed, they will not get those points, right? So some people think that they are doing a high-skilled job, but when we look at their responsibilities, they are not. So, for example, if you're working as a cashier, you're not doing a high-skilled job. If you're working as a cook, you're not doing a high-skilled job. But if you're working as a chef, head chef, that is a high-skilled job. So these two jobs look like the same thing, but one is high-skilled, the other is not, right? A store teller, a store clerk is low-skilled, but a retail supervisor who's managing the store is high-skilled. They look like the same job, but then. So misconception comes from people thinking they're doing high-skilled jobs when they're not. Misconception also comes from people who think that if they just move to another province, then they should be able to get a PNP there, which is also not true. If you just move to Ontario or Manitoba and start working as a secretary, there is no pathway for that in those provinces, right? So a lot of people have these misconceptions that I qualify for certain category-based draw when they don't, qualify for high skill when they don't. They're taking courses they think will lead to a PGWP. So these are all the misconceptions that I keep coming across. And the right way to clear these misconceptions is to check with a professional in advance. Talk to us, get a consultation call, plan your strategy. A lot of people, now I talked about so many changes are happening in immigration, right? But people who have not kept up have a misconception that the old rule still applies. A lot of students graduate from diploma programs and then their spouse applies for a SOWP, spousal open work permit. They get refused. They did not know that diplomas and certificates are not eligible for spousal open. Only after refusal, their refusal letter says you are not in a master's program. Then they realize it. So misconception can be lack of information and not keeping up to date with the changes.
Yeah, I agree. With the array of changes that are happening right now, how do you think the timeline changes for the study permits, the PR, or maybe even the TFWs?
Okay, so the timeline changes in the sense, the biggest change in timelines is, first of all, the processing delays. So for example, for international students, SDS or the student direct stream has just ended. So earlier, student direct stream was supposed to be an expedited stream. So you could just provide your GIC, your language test and all that. If you were from 14 countries, your study permit would be approved somewhat expeditedly. Your chances of getting selected were higher. Now SDS has ended. Everyone has to go through non-SDS streams. So because of that, refusals and processing times will go up. So because of that, you have to apply to your schools way in advance. Even after you come here as a student, now you want to jump to another college. According to the new rule, you have to apply for a new study permit, wait for that new study permit to arrive, and only then you can jump to a new college. Now it's taking between 3 to 6 months for the new study permit. Before that, you cannot start studying in the new college, right? And there is some exception for spring 2025 and winter 2025, but in general, you'll have to wait for the new study permit to arrive. Then you can jump. Earlier, the jumping process was very easy. You just inform IRCC, I'm jumping, start studying. If you're doing a 1+1 program, so one diploma, then another diploma, you cannot use this study permit to study at the next college. You have to wait for a new study permit to arrive. So that can lead to a long gap between joining those two programs, right? So, and it can take 3 to 6 months. So you have to wait again. So all the timelines are getting stretched out for international students. The second thing for workers, it's much, much worse. Right now, LMIAs are taking 9 months to approve. And even then they're getting refused. Workers who are near the end of their PGWP, if they want to switch to an LMIA-based work permit, they have to plan at least 6 months in advance. Their employer has to apply at least 6 months in advance. Mostly better to apply almost a year in advance, because 9 months, it'll take LMIA almost 9 months. Right? And then when you apply for a work permit inside Canada, it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months for a work permit. So the timelines are so stretched out, a year or year and a half just to extend your status. Then if you apply without an approved LMIA, the work permits are getting refused. So even for workers, the timelines are getting so heavily stretched out. And then all the PNPs, they're so overloaded with applications that that even the OINP approvals are very, very slow. So the OINP used to take 3 months. Now it's taking between, in some cases, 5 to 8 months. So the timelines are extremely stretched out. Express entry timelines are still okay. So if you're a CEC candidate, still people are getting it in 4 to 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and they're still meeting 6 months. Otherwise, all timelines are.
Yeah, and these extensions lead to our permits also, which could basically our work permits could expire also. That could be a major issue for most of the people who are within Canada also.
Exactly. If your work permit expires and you filed a new work permit, it's okay. You are in maintained status. But during maintained status, if you travel abroad and you come back, you lose your maintained status. So you cannot work anymore after coming back. So you're kind of locked in place and you cannot, you don't have your work permit approval and you cannot leave the country. So again, you're stuck.
Okay.
So these timelines are causing a lot of chaos in the lives of immigrants.
One of the questions I had was about any advice for the future international students and the workers, but I think you have beautifully explained to plan well, have a clear career path, and as soon as you are here, have good connections maybe with good people and also network, follow continuously IRCC and other professionals just to be more updated on the changes happening. And then hopefully your path will be more easier than waiting for the last moment.
The days of waiting until the last moment are, if somebody comes to me, the later somebody comes to me in their process, the less I can help. Right? So somebody who's coming to me before they even started applying, I can make a beautiful path for them. Like if you go from this place to then jump this status, it's a beautiful. Of course, IRCC will jump in the middle and change everything. But at least based on whatever info we know, we can make a nice pathway for them. Right? So, but if somebody says, I'm graduating next month, what should I do? It gets a little harder. Somebody says, oh, my PGWP is already refused. What can I do? Very little. Somebody says, oh, my status is expiring in 3 months. What are my PR chances? We can't. So there is a nice 5-year pathway. The closer you come to me in this year, I can help you. The closer you come to me here, I cannot help you. So there is a spectrum. So people think of immigration consultants and lawyers as we have some magic secret formula, like we know some secret pathways to PR that nobody else knows. All the pathways that are on the website, we know, right? So we cannot pull out some new pathway for people at the last moment.
Yeah, thank you for the insights, Madhur. So with this, we come to an end of episode 1. And immigration is a never-ending flow where you have a lot of questions, and we believe there's a part 2 needed for this. So we will be coming back with a part 2 with Madhur, and hopefully we can answer more of your questions and help whoever is listening to us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here, guys. It was a very interesting conversation.